Hey everybody, and welcome to Voices from the Mausoleum. We're in 2022 officially by the time this video goes up, and that's scary to me. Hopefully you guys won't be able to hear the fireworks. There's not that many going on yet because it's still kind of early in the night, but you may hear some, so apologize if you do. So I've been on YouTube with this channel for almost a year. And a lot has kind of changed and shaped, and I've added some stuff, and I felt like it was probably maybe a good idea to do sort of a new intro. So in this episode, we're getting to know Voices from the Mausoleum. It did not occur to me until I was doing a influential horror conversation that I don't introduce myself by my name to like pretty much anybody. Um, so for those of you who don't know, my name is Angel. Voices from the Mausoleum is my baby. I wanted to do something with horror because it is just something I'm super into and have always been into, and I wanted to do something creative with it. Um, just because I don't know, I wanted an outlet for it. I don't have a lot of people in my life that enjoy horror to the extent that I do. So this kind of gave me an opportunity to share that love with other people who also have that love. When I was coming up with a name, I had a couple that I really loved, but I did research to make sure that nothing that I was coming up with was already taken or used in another way for any other possible thing. Um, People, content creators, business owners, they put a lot into what they're doing. And so I just wanted to respect that and make sure that my name was like 100% original. Um, Fun fact, the original name that I really wanted to use was Goremonger, but it's used for, I can't remember what else it's used for, but it's used for something else. And I would never take that from another, creator. So I started thinking about like what I wanted to do. And it just became, really clear to me that like the purpose behind creating Voices from the Mausoleum was to share this passion for horror, to share horror artists, to talk about horror media, to discuss, to talk about the movies or TV shows or what goes into making special effects, or, and just sharing this and like getting it out into the world. Um, and I think that's kind of where my mind went with the radio tower. I was kind of like, okay, so pushing this signal out, getting this message out. And I really just kind of ran with that. It was actually a very easy thing for me to come up with. As far as like what visuals I thought made the most sense, it was just kind of like a light bulb went off, and I was like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. And so that's kind of where, and in Mausoleum, I was trying to think of something, I think kind of edgy, and I was like, I don't know, and I couldn't think of anything for a really long time. And then for I don't know, I got stuck on this concept of like older horror, like Tales from the Crypt and like the Crypt Keeper. And I was like, okay, and I'm like, my mind's, my wheels are spinning. And so anyway, so I went from Crypt to Mausoleum, and there you have Voices from the Mausoleum. I go by Voices a lot. When I tried to create my social medias, Voices was taken. So like a lot of my all, no, I don't think any of my social media stuff is the same. I think like Twitter is at From Mausoleum. I think Facebook is Voices FM or FTM, or like it's just, it was kind of like ugh. But the voices that I found on, I think it was Twitter, had absolutely nothing to do with horror, and it was definitely was not Voices from the Mausoleum. So yeah, that's my setup for Voices from the Mausoleum. I did YouTube for a year prior to this. I have another channel for those of you who don't know. And that channel, if you're interested, I can link it below. It's a channel for moms. And essentially, I wanted to paint a very real picture of what being a mother was like, the ugly, the not so fun, the effed up parts of being a mom. And so my best friend and I, we made a channel for it. So I'd already been on YouTube for a little over a year by the time I decided to do voices. So I had some experience with that. My editor, Mike, is also a very best friend of mine. He is married to my best friend of 20 plus years. He's been in my life for a very long time. He's someone that I love and trust dearly. And he does our editing for the mom channel. So I kind of went to him and I was like, hey, like, how do you feel about taking this project on? And he has more than exceeded my expectations. He's a visionary when coming up with ideas for new things. A testament to that is our Bigfoot video, and then of course the Carrie video that we did. And I'll link those below, or maybe I'll put one of them up here. Maybe I'll put the Carrie video up here, and I'll link the Bigfoot the video below. But we work really well together. We're very constructive when we plan together, and so that has been just a lot of fun, like building this with him and like getting his input and him teaching me things and showing me things. So and Mike and I make Voices from the Mausoleum. It's just the two of us. We don't pay anybody to do anything else. We don't get anybody to do anything else. It's just the two of us, and I think we work really well together. Fun fact, the intro you saw at the beginning of the video is a brand new intro that Mike made based off of some ideas I threw at him last minute. He puts up with a lot of shit from me in that regard, because I sometimes get these visuals and I'm like, I need it to look like this. And so basically I just wanted to, I have a few questions that people ask that I'm going to answer. I'm going to talk about my goals for 2022. And then I just want to talk a little bit about what my content looks like. So if you're new to the channel, my content is a very mixed bag, and that is 100% on purpose. I don't just love horror movies. I love anything that's horror. I'm really trying the end of 2021 and really pushing into 2022. I'm trying really hard to get back into making time for reading. So, I'm getting more into horror books and indie horror authors and short stories and comics and these really cool artists that are just very unique and make these crazy dark but fun images. And getting into just a lot of other things that aren't just related to horror movies or those sorts of things. And so my content is pretty diverse. I do Let's Plays. I've done some special effect makeup stuff. I do top fives. Kicking off this month is my conversations with quite a few people. I think there's 10 on the list total. But I did these top 5 influential horror videos with a plethora of people from all different walks of life, all different ethnicities and belief systems. And we just had these beautiful conversations about horror, and it has been one of the best experiences with Voices that I've had so far. I've really enjoyed getting to know these individuals, supporting them and sharing their work, and just being able to sit down and just talk about the stuff that drives us, this passion of horror and what that looks like for different people. So that's going to be going out this month. That's definitely my one of my proudest projects. Probably the only one that kind of ranks with that would be the Carrie video that we did. And so my content, like I said, very mixed bag. When I interact with other content creators, because these two were questions that somebody had asked on Twitter, was, what kind of content are you trying to put out? And then what kind of content do you look for? And I think content wise, I look for pretty much anything. Like I watch booktubers, I watch horror Let's Players, I watch reviewers. I don't really have like a super small, attention span for what I'm willing to watch or commit to. And I think that has been a little bit stressful, but only in like a really good way. So I love that I'm getting more into all these other pieces of horror and not just kind of the stuff that are in my comfort zone by myself in front of a camera. That's been kind of crazy. So I have a cheat sheet. So one of the other things that somebody else and I were talking about was, what does this concept of horror mean to me? Like, I guess, what am I looking for in horror? What stands out to me that makes it content that I love or horror that I love? That's a really hard question because I love so many things about it. I did learn recently that as far as like movies, I'm not a super big jump scare fan. As it turns out, that's like something that really annoys me and gets under my skin. So I don't like that. But otherwise, like, I'm a really big fan of creature features. I love found footage. I like things like atmospheric horror, things that don't rely on jump scares or pitch black to make things scary. I like character development. I like relationships that I can invest in and care about. And I think horror to me is just anything that is, I mean, quite literally horrifying. There's this argument of aliens or aliens horror, and I'm like, well, I mean, if you're looking at it from the franchise Alien, yeah, that's horrifying. But also, I mean, aliens in essence are a type of monster from most perspectives that we see in film and other medias. But so, and serial killers, I like psychological horror. I'm pretty much open to interpretation for horror movies because I think that is such a subjective term for so many people, and we get told all the time like, oh well, that's not horror, and it's like, that's fine that it doesn't impact you that way. But yeah, I think what I look for in horror is, I mean, I just want an experience that's unique. I want something that makes me think, something that makes me uncomfortable, something that lingers. And that kind of stretches across all subgenres, I would say, of horror. um I think I answered that okay. um yeah, and so one of the other things, so my hashtag horror bestie Tasha asked me, pineapple on pizza. No, pineapple has no business on pizza. I don't believe that fruit has a place in anything that's like overindulgent, like pizza or cake. Keep that shit out away from my good stuff. Like I don't want it involved. Um, and then I think one of the other things that I thought would be kind of fun was if I told you like 5 things about me that are not related to horror at all. Um, and I think the only one of my 5 that I listed for myself that is kind of related to horror is that I am like the biggest Buffy fan. I own all 7 seasons on DVD. I own both video games. I have 2 soundtracks. I have the cross necklace that Angel gives Buffy in Welcome to the Hellmouth. I have an autographed Spike comic book. Buffy is, because I started watching it at the age that Buffy is in the show, it was super influential to me, and it went through a lot of things that I had to go through. I had to switch schools for reasons that I'm not going to discuss. But I had to switch schools, and I remember like getting up that first day at that new school, which was a Razorback. So my school mascot was the same as Sunnydale High. And so I remember getting up that morning and watching the first episode of Buffy, and it gave me such a sense of peace. Like, here's this girl, she's pretty average other than the fact that she slays vampires. She just wants to go somewhere and like fit in and just be part of, like, live this normal life and get away from all the stuff that she's getting away from. And it was so relatable at the time that I saw it, and I really needed that. I needed that role model, that strong, female role that took on so many things and did so many things. I mean, and a lot of the stuff is a little less deep than like obviously like vampires and stuff, but the some of the boyfriend stuff was super relatable. When I was 21, I had custody of my sister who was 15, which was about Dawn's age, from the show. And so I related in a lot of ways to Buffy having to take on this mother role and not really knowing what she was doing, but trying to do her best. And I think like she's just always been someone that I've related to, and I love the show. I loved pretty much most of the story arcs. I was devastated when it went off the air. I cried for like a week. So I'm like a massive Buffy fan. Anything Buffy gets me hyped. Love Buffy. Another thing about me that you may or may not know, is I'm like a huge craft junkie. I have a Cricut. I make T-shirts and cups, and I paint, and I don't know, like I make signs, cups, T-shirts, and not just with voices stuff on it. um, yeah, I've made my own wreaths. Like, I love crafting, and that's something that I actually didn't discover about myself until a couple years ago, and that's like become this massive part of who I am. Which is a lot of fun. I enjoy doing it when I have time for it. And it is helpful when I want to do stuff for myself and for my channel, because then I already know how to make most of the stuff. Yeah, and then another thing about me is I really like board games a lot. Like, we used to do game nights before COVID. relatively frequently, but we really like board games. I really like board games. I like playing all types of board games. Probably two of my favorite is this game called Pandemic, which I played before COVID. And it was a lot of fun. It sounds like it's not so much fun, but it was a lot of fun. Then I think probably ranking up with that one would be there's two other games. One is this game called, it's a board game called, what is it called? Betrayal in the house of the hill, betrayal of the house, something like that. We always just call it betrayal, but it's a super fun horror game with these tiles where you build out this house and then you play these different things, you play these different characters, and then when the haunt happens, there's like all these stories that can happen, and I think you roll for the story or something like that, but you pick the story and then somebody ends up being the bad guy and you have to like, it's super fun. And then the other one that I really like, it's not so much a board game, but it's a group game for like a group of people at like a party or something, is a game called Werewolf, where you play as like a team, a town, and you have these people that are the seers, and then you have the werewolves, and the seers know who the werewolves are, and without any game pieces or any clues, you have to decide who the werewolf is. You start talking and engaging with each other. It's a super good icebreaker game because it gets everybody kind of talking and thinking. And then you can do things like when my best friend was the werewolf one time, I was like, she's obviously the werewolf. Like, she can't even sit still. Like, I know her really well. And to try to get people off her track, she was like, she's just saying that because she's the werewolf. And it's a lot of fun. People just start getting like real crazy and intense and like, I told you she was a werewolf. And like, and then the werewolf gets an opportunity to kill people off. And it's a lot of fun. So I really like board games. Another kind of fun thing is like, I'm actually kind of a big animal lover in general. I really like cats, like big cats, little cats, don't care what size cats. But I recently started becoming super obsessed with red pandas because they are the cutest thing in the fucking planet. And I follow a bunch of zoos because certain zoos will have like babies and then they'll like let you follow their little journey to growing up. And, I love red pandas. They're very cute. That's probably like my newest favorite animal. And then one other random fact about me is I actually used to be pretty big into historical reenactments, particularly the Civil War. When I was in high school, I was in the history club, and the president or the teacher that was over the club, I forget what their role was called, but he was a historical reenactor, and it started out as this extra credit project that I grew to really love. And we went every year. We did two in particular. We did the Battle of Aiken, which was a massive one. And then we did another smaller one that was called the Battle of Waynesboro. And the Waynesboro one was super cool because it was on like this it was on like a peanut field. So like we would like go out, but when the battles weren't going on because you can't be in the way, we would go out and we would like pick peanuts out of the field and we'd clean them up and we'd like make real boiled peanuts over a fire. And you had like, I dressed the part, like my dress was handmade, and it was so much fun. When we did Battle of Aiken, I think it was like the second year that we did it. We got to meet the girls that I went with from my high school. Like we got to be these like little nurse helpers in this big scene. So there's like this medical tent with all this crazy period correct medical equipment, and this woman Valerie who was the shit. Like this woman knew it all, and she was such a phenomenal actress, and she did such a great job. But she would have the nurses go and collect names to send letters home for the dying, and it was always just like a lot of fun, and it was awake, and they always did these balls, and the guys from the Citadel would show up, and I remember being in high school and being like, oh my god, the guys from the Citadel, and like being so pumped, and they're all dressed up in their like uniforms, and we would dance with them, and we'd hang out, and I mean like it was a blast. Probably the only things that I missed from high school was going to do those. But they were a lot of fun, and I love doing them, and it really does make history like a lot more I don't know what the word is. I don't want to say interesting because I think history is interesting in general. I've kind of always been into history, but I think it's like it just it makes certain things about history so much more meaningful, like the concept of death and what these people went through, and it brings it home for you when you're in the middle of it and there's fake blood everywhere and you're covered in it and you're like, oh my god, like it's just, you almost forget that it's not real, and I love doing historical reenactments. That was so much fun. So there's just 5 random things about me that are not related to horror, other than Buffy, kind of. And then the only other thing I really kind of wanted to talk about was what the channel is going to look like kind of in 2022. Some goals that I have, which is kind of, just a fun thing that I saw a lot of people doing, was posting their goals. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do it because I have a bunch. So one of my big goals for next year is the Mothman Festival, which I booked our place that we're going to stay at. I'm super pumped about going. Pretty sure there's like pending they cancel it or some crazy thing like happens. We are absolutely going. That's next September, in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. So we're going to go do that next year, and I'm super excited about that. I also want to have more artists on my show, digital sketch artists, painters, that paint or sculpt or do these other things like that in all kinds of different mediums, but they specifically focus on horror as their genre, and get, just kind of getting more involved in that community and meeting new people in that community and helping support them and having them on the channel. One kind of big one for me, I watch a YouTuber, he's a horror Let's Player, and his name is Mr. Craven, and I've watched him for years. And I love him. I love his energy. I'm pretty sure I love who he is as a person, at least who he seems to be. I'm pretty sure that's who he is. And I would love to do a video with him about like his top 5 horror movies. I would be so smitten with the concept of doing that. So that's one of my goals. I want to be on a couple more podcasts this year that are not my own. That would be a lot of fun. I want to get in at least one paranormal investigation. There's quite a lot of groups in the city I live in that do it. So I'm going to hopefully find the right one and be able to go and do something like that probably towards the end of the year, because I need to have my own equipment if I'm going to go do it. And that's going to take time and money to accumulate that. So, and then another thing Mike and I are going to work on this year is we're going to try to make some horror shorts. Some movies, like to try to play in this concept of writing, directing, and filmmaking, because we did have so much fun making the Carrie video, and he seems to really enjoy doing the stuff like we did with Bigfoot. So yeah. And then of course, I just plan on interacting with more people, getting more engagement on the channel. Hopefully I'll see a lot more growth this year. It's been a phenomenal first year. I don't have any complaints at all. So I'm really looking forward to what 2022 brings. And yeah, that's getting to know Voices from the Mausoleum. I'm on all the socials. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and then of course YouTube, and I also have a podcast. So the podcast portion is also the it's going to be a podcast version of the episodes I post every week, unless it's like a visual episode, like a Let's Play or a like an effects look, or just something that you would need to see it to get the full effect of the video. And then every Saturday I do a spooky Saturday story. Well, it's going to be more than one, but I had a lot of indie authors send me stuff to share. If you're someone that did that, I really appreciate you trusting me with your work and being willing to let me share it on my podcast. It's very meaningful to me. Hope I do them all justice. So I'll be doing those on Saturdays as a podcast only. And I'm not going to announce it quite at this time yet. But I do have another continuing collaboration with a fellow YouTuber that I've become friends with recently. So there's some new stuff going on with that too as well. I also do a monthly book club on my website. There's a forum underneath the book that we're doing every month. If you want to join in, grab the book, read it, come chat, hang out, meet some cool people, and hopefully discover some badass horror stories to talk about. So that's Voices from the Mausoleum. I really have loved doing this. It's been meaningful and fun, and I don't know. I could probably go on and on and on about that. The horror community is one that I wasn't expecting to be so like welcomed into, not because I assumed it was garbage, but just because I just think that the sense of community and friendship and just I don't know, the level of support that I've gotten has just like really blown me away. And I've met a lot of really amazing people, and I'm excited to get to know them further. And I'm excited about getting to know people that I haven't met yet. Meeting new people. I said that weird. Anyway, yeah, so that's my new intro video, sort of. Getting to know Voices 2022. Links for everything will be below. Let me know what you guys want to see. What's horror content that you're interested in? Is there something you want to know about me or the channel that maybe I didn't answer? I'm an open book. I respond right away. I'm very communicative. I love engaging and talking to people. If you message me, I will message you back. Unless you send me something crude, don't do that. But otherwise, I love interaction. That's one of, I've learned that that's one of my favorite parts of doing this, and I didn't know that before. So, anyway, Happy New Year, everybody. I'm really hoping 2022 is going to be a kick-ass year. I'm crossing my fingers. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how 2022 fares against this past year. And yeah, so enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody, and I will see you in the next one.